Many restaurant owners on Kitchen Nightmares are stubborn, which host Gordon Ramsay tries to help them break like a culinary drill sergeant, and it often leads to tense verbal bouts. He tries the food as well, and the dishes on this list stand out as the cream of the crap. Get ready for some gross food, folks! When a restaurant claims their dish is their signature, they better make sure it's perfect all the time, especially when a food critic arrives armed to put them on blast for either a great meal or a forgettable one. However, when a chef like Gordon Ramsay asks to try your signature dish in the first ever episode of Kitchen Nightmares, it should be better than perfect. Unfortunately, even with everything on the line, Bonapartes restaurant in the United Kingdom swung for the fences but struck out hard. It doesn't matter if a dish is vegetarian, vegan, meat-heavy, or plucked from the sea. The ingredients should be fresh, plain and simple. Few places can withstand a Yelp review claiming dinner came with a complimentary side of E. coli. When Ramsay wanders into the back of the house to chat with Bonaparte's chefs, they're eager to serve him up their signature dish, scallops with black pudding sauce. But it turns out that the scallops are rotten. Before Ramsay even opens his mouth after taking his first bite, he storms out the back door and coughs them up onto the ground. Serving rancid scallops to a Michelin-rated chef will haunt the employees at Bonapartes for a long time to come. Vegetarians may never understand how people can stuff their faces with food that used to have a face, and meat eaters certainly don't understand how a steak wouldn't crank someone's appetite into high gear. Even though a chef might prefer meat, they must offer options for diners who crave greens and grains instead. That means if someone orders a meatless dish, you better make completely sure there's no meat. In the second ever U.S. episode of Kitchen Nightmares, Chef Gordon Ramsay visits Dillon's, a restaurant in Manhattan, New York, that doesn't seem to pay much attention to customers who require vegetarian options. The first dish Ramsay receives in this episode of Kitchen Nightmares, after hesitantly plopping down in a seat, is the vegetarian appetizer sampler. Two suspicious-looking fritters stare at Ramsay while he clearly musters up the courage to delve in. Good thing he's brave. Right out of the gate, he's disgusted by the fritters. What follows is considerably worse. One of the fritters has meat inside, and lamb is what Ramsay assumes. With this mistake, Dillon's opens itself up to any number of health and legal implications. If you've ever been to the melting pot, you know how fondue works. If you have friends in the Hamptons who throw fancy parties, you might know how fondue works. If you're a cheese freak who eats it in every way humanly possible, you absolutely know how fondue works. Unfortunately, a restaurant called Handlebar in New York, featured in an episode of Kitchen Nightmares, didn't know how fondue worked. Fondue lovers are of the cook-your-own-food mentality. It's interactive fun, and the outcome is delicious morsels of skewered treats. But when a restaurant's not fondue-focused, Ramsay thinks it's absurd for customers to cook their own food. Take, for example, Handlebar's Filet mignon fondue, where raw chunks of steak are dipped into bubbling oil to cook to temperature. In an act of hopeful luck, he tosses salt over his shoulder and says a prayer. He then goes full-on Gordon Ramsay mode, calling the dish
rancid, pointless, tasteless, a complete, utter joke.
The word fiesta elicits partying, freedom, music, and good food that gets the hips shaking and the appetites growing. So when Chef Ramsay visits Fiesta Sunrise in West Nyack, New York, he naturally expects a fun environment along with great food rocking out in his belly. What he gets in an episode of Kitchen Nightmares near the end of the first season, however, is far from a celebration. The combo platter Ramsay receives comes immediately after he intensely questions the restaurant owner, and the guy's clearly caught off guard. A scorching dish consisting of what looks like a taco, enchilada, and burrito arrives to an already frustrated Ramsay. The famous chef's initial impression is someone got sick on his plate because he can't immediately distinguish anything through the cheese-crusted mess of food. After dissecting the burrito like a surgeon performing an autopsy, he finds the chicken to be dry and the beef impossible to swallow. This is one fiesta you don't want to RSVP to. Whether you prefer soup, bisque, chowder, stew, the canned stuff, or Mama's mystery sauce with everything in the pantry, a hearty bowl of food is comforting. It coats your ribs, warms the soul, and then sends you to bed with visions of oyster crackers dancing through your head. The hot potato soup at Hot Potato Cafe, however, doesn't quite offer the same comfort, as Ramsay quickly discovers in a second season episode of Kitchen Nightmares. The chef wants to try a soup, so he orders the hot potato soup. At first glance, it looks like a regular bowl of chowder. Nothing too exciting, but definitely nothing alarming. But then the kitchen workers stare in horror as his face contorts Cirque du Soleil style while choking it down. He compares it to lumps of glue and then looks directly into the camera to confidently say,
What a embarrassment.
A few episodes later, Chef Ramsay pays a much-needed visit to Bazzini in Ridgewood, New Jersey, a restaurant with an overwhelmed head chef and less than impressive decor. The restaurant's named after Paul Bazzini, the head honcho in the back. With the staff's motivation careening downhill, they bring in the talents of Ramsay to employ some serious butt-whooping to turn attitudes around. It all starts with the anxiety-inducing food tasting, of course. Instead of choosing dishes that sound enticing to him, Ramsay asks for a variety to sample. Gordon Ramsay, sitting alone in your dining room asking for what you believe are your standout entrees, has to be an anxiety-inducing experience. When the chicken Milanese arrives with an entree-sized portion of pesto fettuccine pasta, Ramsay comments that the sheer size of the cutlet reminds him of an elephant's foot. As he suspects, it's charred all to hell and impossible to cut through or chew. Even the sound the knife makes while cracking through the cement-like exterior is off-putting. The wealthy community of Boca Raton, Florida, is the home of Anna Vincenzo's, an unfortunately unpopular Italian restaurant run by a self-taught chef named Cece. Cece's big and brash, and she's one of the main reasons her staff believes business has greatly slowed. When Ramsay and his Kitchen Nightmares entourage arrive, he knows it's time to order up some of their most popular dishes and prepare to pick it all apart Gordon Ramsay style. And man, does the staff look stressed. Honestly, we can't blame them. Ramsay takes a long look at the menu before asking for, among other things, a Snapper Anna, what he's told is a restaurant favorite. The scowling look on the chef's face increases with every close inspection of the dishes, but the Snapper Anna revolts him to no end. He actually asks, "Where's the snapper?" and is told, "It's under all that," referring to a pile of garnishes by the server. As he's poking around a pile of uncooked fish-flavored mush, he calls it a dog's dinner. The meticulous pairing of ingredients is of utmost importance, especially when a chef's trying to serve a dish meant to pack a memorable punch. Cooking is all about taking risks to see what works, and before adding something to the official menu, it better work. It's a huge waste of time and money if not. At Parra de Burriana in Spain, the head chef apparently missed the memo. The first thing Ramsay notices while flipping through the menu during this episode of Kitchen Nightmares is the confusing array of themed food the restaurant serves. One night, burgers are the sole focus. Another night sees Asian food as the primary cuisine. Regardless of the head-scratching moment, Ramsay takes on the prawns in chocolate sauce, Chef Lawrence's signature dish. Prawns in a chocolate sauce? Yeah, Ramsay's right there with you. The sauce isn't pure chocolate. It's a hot, over-spicy chili chocolate sauce that, according to Ramsay, is the result of stupid arrogance. It's simply a failed attempt to pair ingredients that don't belong together. Even if you don't embrace the foodie culture running rampant nowadays, your ears must perk up at the words sushi pizza. Is it actually possible to combine two extremely different foods and keep it delicious? Yes, it's possible. But sometimes that sushi pizza you see on the menu should have stayed two different foods. Chef Ramsay's experience in an episode of Kitchen Nightmares at Sushi Co. in Thousand Oaks, California, agrees. Immediately, Ramsay notices the head chef Akira loitering around the host stand, prompting Ramsay to convey a natural anxiety considering the person who runs the kitchen operations isn't in the kitchen. When the pizza finally arrives, the server explains the dish consists of rice, salmon, crab, mayonnaise, and some cheese. With one final look of apprehension, Ramsay takes his first bite. Immediately, Ramsay spits the bite onto the plate, calling it rancid, covering it up with his napkin so he presumably doesn't have to stare into the abyss of disappointment he just put into his mouth. There are foods that belong on a grill, and there are others that don't. They don't need heat, they don't need open flames, and they certainly don't need a char. Park's Edge in Atlanta, Georgia gives cold dishes an unnecessary dose of heat, and Ramsay ain't impressed in a U.S. Season 4 episode of Kitchen Nightmares. The word salad often falls under the appetizer section of a menu. It whets the appetite so your stomach's ready for a savory entree. But when Ramsay sees grilled Caesar salad staring back at him on the menu, he's perplexed. He literally stands up and clangs on a water glass like he's about to give a wedding dinner speech, and he ridicules the dish to every table of customers sitting around him. The lettuce leaves weren't cleaned thoroughly, and the dressing was overly spicy when Ramsay finally tried it. The message? Don't grill what doesn't need a grill. It's that simple. When Chef Gordon Ramsay first walks into the Priory on their episode of the UK Kitchen Nightmares, the decor is more than a bit overwhelming. It looks more like he's accidentally wandered into a bustling Catholic church than into a restaurant. Then you see the carving stations where the cooks lop off huge chunks of meat for guests who stare in awe at the glistening carnivorous meal they are about to dive headfirst into. After Ramsay speaks with some of the quite elderly diners, he goes in for the kill, the Carvery platter. It's basically a smattering of a bunch of different foods to offer a sampler platter-like experience. The chef pulls up a seat, takes a deep breath, and digs in. Needless to say, Ramsay moves from item to item on his plate and has nothing but poor thoughts on them all. Right out of the gate, he bangs on one of the roasted potatoes with his knife, and it sounds like he's clanging on cast iron. He actually describes cutting through this tuft of sloppy stuffing like trying to cut through a silicone implant. The Yorkshire pudding is soggy and doughy, and the meat, the main event of the show, is unbearably dry. It seems nearly any odd ingredient you can imagine has found its way onto a pizza at some point or another. Sausage isn't an odd ingredient at all, though. It's a delicious meat that belongs on pizza. But the people who serve Chef Gordon Ramsay a sausage pizza at Pantaleone's in Denver find a way to make it hard in a 6th season episode of the US Kitchen Nightmares. When the pizza arrives to his table, Ramsay exclaims, "Holy crap!" And for good reason. The thing's the size of a sewer grate, but way greasier. The dough is incredibly thick, and each slice drips oil like a hospital IV. Smiling, the server informs Ramsay he's picking apart the thin crust pie. Ramsay stares in absolute astonishment. This might just be one of the reasons people opt for a pizzeria down the street over this oily mess.
It's like the pizza that ate Denver.
Check out one of our newest videos right here, plus even more mashed videos about your favorite food shows are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.